For IR again, we have 4 questions, 2 questions, 150 words, 10 marks, 2 questions, 250 words to be answered in 250 words, each carrying 15 marks, total 20, 30, 50 marks questions for IR. Let's see how this IR, again in the IR section they have asked. While discussing the governance part, I had discussed that very relevant current information and the current happenings are relevant for us as far as question papers are concerned, and they generally tend to ask those questions. So out of those 4 questions that we have discussed just now, first question was on the e-governance, second was the civil society, environment and development models. I tell you, all these in one way or the other have been widely covered by the newspapers and journals recently, so quite expected these questions were. Again, here we have 4 questions. Let me first discuss the overall 4 questions. First, the India-Africa relation. If you see our visit of the Prime Minister to the African countries in the last 5-6 years or 7-8 years, quite frequent, very frequent. It only conveys that India relation with Africa has been very critical as far as international politics is concerned. And as a civil servant aspirant, you are supposed to know the things happening around. And if you know the things happening around, and the question paper setter will also ask you a question from the things you should be aware of. Therefore, these questions are quite expected and are expected. This globalization and the challenge to globalization is the second question we will be discussing. This is also important in the post-Cold War, post-globalization phase. It's the most in thing that has just arrived on the scene, that there is a sort of challenge to concept of globalization, and the nationalism feeling is again reinventing itself. Let's see how it goes. Globalization was important. Energy security, most important. And UN reforms. India has been advocating for Indian UN reforms because it is not democratically representing the whole world and the policies of the world. Therefore, all 4 questions, again I tell you, are not something which was not expected. All were expected. It has come. Let's see how we should approach this question. India-Africa digital partnership. We have other partnerships also. We have a sports partnership, we have academic partnerships, we have other relations, we have business, trade relationship. This time, the question has asked India-Africa digital partnership in achieving mutual respect, co-development and long-term institutional partnership. Elaborate. Digital word has come to stay. Whether inside India, we had a question on e-governance, and we have a question also on digital partnership in IR aspect. So, digital thing inside and outside, very relevant and very important, critical. India-Africa digital partnership, we have to pack it with certain data and information. What are the real partnership? Not beating about the bush and using some English here and there. What are the real partnership issues that has to be discussed here? And we have discussed here. Mutual respect, co-development and long-term institutional partnership. These 3 aspects were asked in the question paper. Mutual respect, co-development and long-term institutional partnership. So our question has to focus itself, our answer has to focus itself on these 3 aspects. Let's see. Mutual respect, India approach, unlike conditional, we generally, we don't attach any strings to our aid, like the generally Western countries do. मैं आपको तब एड करूंगा जब बदले में मुझे ये बेनिफिट आप दोगे. India's approach, unlike conditional Western aid, reflects African because it is mutual respect, based on mutual respect. Respect African sovereignty and development priorities. Pan-African E-Network 2009, E-Vidya Bharati and E-Arogya Bharati scheme. I mean, these launched in 2019 provides 15,000 scholarship annually. These are the data and program that we have to use in our answer. About co-development, co-creating technology tailored to local needs rather than one-way technology transfer. This is not one-way traffic. It has to be co-development. It has to be mutual. So Indian-African relationship, because they also are global south and developing societies are struggling with their developmental models. India too, yes, India may have gone ahead in the developmental race, but therefore it is our duty also to take along these developing brothers. The partnership besides co-create, inspired by the India's Aadhaar, UPI and DigiLocker, three flagship issues in digital world. Namibia, Sierra Leone and Mauritius to adopt India's DPI for financial inclusion and e-governance. We are also, we are not only saying that Aadhaar, UPI and DigiLocker is being used in India, they are also using this principle and customizing it to their local needs and requirements. Examples include Tago's modular open source digital ID system, India's NPSI 2000 Zambia Smart Zambia initiative, advancing digital governance. So, India has been cooperating for the co-development in the digital world with African countries on a mutual respect basis with no strings attached. Long-term institutional partnerships. We are not only short-term, day-to-day partners. When we build relationship, we build relationship for our long-term perspective. India invests in building human capital, training, digital capacity building, institutional capacity through initiative like IIT Madras's campus in Zanzibar offering AI and data science courses. Exim Bank's lines of credit details this project. India-Africa Forum Summit, Africa's Union Digital Transformation Study 2030, ongoing training and collaboration under Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation Program, along with Africa's Agenda 2063 development. India has 2047 Viksit Bharat program, and this Africa has Agenda 2063 development vision. So therefore, based on our mutual trust and cooperation and our effort for co-development, we have been indulging in these kind of long-term institution basis arrangement also. Despite challenges, Africa digital divide and rural, there are certain lags also. Affordable open source digital public infrastructure model for us inclusive deepening ties in enhancing global south. African digital partnership is a hallmark of equal co-created progress that respects sovereignty, build capacities for, but still there are certain limitations also. They cannot just copy it because it has to suit their local conditions also. So this is the kind of digital cooperation based on mutual trust, cooperation and long-term institution building that our relationship is evolving and building with a long-term interest in mind. Now, question number 2. Waning of globalization, post-Cold War world is becoming a site of sovereign nationalism. I was telling you, the globalization, the hype of globalization had its own limitation, and now it is exposed. Reasons can be manifold, but right now the reality is globalization has been waning, and the inward looking sort of sovereign nationalism is again having a say in international politics. And one that only proves that in international politics nothing is permanent except your national interest. If national interests, in the national interest, you can befriend somebody and you make somebody enemy. Don't do it for the sake of doing it. So globalization was in the national interest. We had a globalization world over, and now that the globalization phase is over and people are again in the national interest, they are not for globalization. Let's see how and what is happening around and how it has happened. Economic dimension, these are the facts. Economic dimension, 2008 global financial crisis and COVID-19 exposed vulnerability of globalization. Reshoring and protectionism came. America first policy of USA, and India also has its own Atmanirbhar Bharat, and actually Atmanirbhar Bharat is helping India in today's world when the tariff rates are going northward. Trade slowdown was the region. Investment retrenchment, UNCTAD 22 notes global FDI follows. This is the data only to show you that yes, globalization is waning. Geopolitical dimension, the Russia-Ukraine war, US-China trade tensions, weaponization of energy, very important, and self-interest. Supply chain nationalism, it was expected that global supply chain had its limitation. It has sort of crumbling. COVID-19 exposed it again. Over dependence on global supply chain, countries like the US and Japan enacted incentives to onshore critical industries. Reasons, these are the facts, and leading to dilution of globalization. Now, rise of sovereign nationalism, the country's nationalism. Why and how? What are the factors leading to it? Political example. We will be having cultural and political dimension to this revivalism, this cultural and social nationalism. Data we will be supporting, an Indian context we will be discussing. Political example is America first, Brazil, Bolsonaro, India emphasis on Atmanirbhar Bharat, and EU Brexit reflects prioritization of national interest. Fine. Cultural and political dimension. Rising identity politics and immigration restrictions in Europe and the United States reflected revival of sovereign borders. Cultural, social, and nationalism reasons are also important. We have discussed it. Data point, according to just this data will show you, global merchandise trade volume grew only 0.8%, far below the post-Cold War average of 5%, highlighting stagnation in globalization. This data has been used to substantiate that globalization is on the wane. Indian context, India has adopted a strategic nationalism, emphasizing Make in India, digital sovereignty, data localization, and cautious engagement in the trade. Exit from the RCEP in 19 simultaneously upholds multilateralism through G20 presidency, and the Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam has been our philosophy since ages. So India has been very strategic, cautious, at the same time weighing pros and cons. We have been engaging in multilateralism also through G20 presidency just few months back. Thus, the post-Cold War world is witnessing a waning of hyper-globalization. I won't say globalization is waning, hyper-globalization is waning, and the rise of pragmatic sovereign nationalism, where states balance global integration with national resilience. So, it's quite natural for our appreciation as the developing countries are coming and maturing, and the Western countries are not very comfortable with that. And once large number of countries develop, and they develop on their own, so therefore American will not be in favor of, in their national interest, in favor of multilateralism, because they face competition from these growing number of independent developing countries becoming stronger and stronger. Energy security question on energy security constitute the dominant kingpin of India's foreign policy and is linked with India's overarching influence in Middle Eastern countries. How do you integrate energy security with India's foreign policy trajectories in coming years? The energy security, the question should include certain points like energy security and foreign policy, the Middle East dependence, diaspora factor, and strategic balancing and diversification efforts. What is the actual state of affair right now, and what is the future projections for integration? And then conclude it. Our the present energy security and foreign policy current context should discuss the state of affairs out now. 60% of India's crude imports come from Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and diaspora 900 million Indians live in Gulf, making a sort of organic relationship with the Gulf, which are oil rich, energy rich, and our people. So it leads to people linkages also. Strategic balancing, India navigates relations with rival blocs. It's very important. We have a very beautiful way of handling countries which may not be on good terms, but they have good terms with us. Mutually, they may not have. So, like India has good rival blocs like Iran, Saudi Arabia, and UAE, and then again Israel. We are having that strategic balancing act in the Middle East. Diversification efforts, we have kept our ear and eyes open also. We have not only we are not only glued to that local source, we have diversified our interest and looking for other sources of import of energy for our security purposes, like importing LNG from Qatar, oil from Russia, and investment in Africa and Latin America shows India's attempts to reduce Middle East over-dependence. Future trajectories for integration is renewable energy, energy transport corridors, strategic reserve expansion. This is important. Renewable diplomacy, collaborating on solar, green hydrogen, and critical minerals, and international solar alliance, and one sun, one world, one grid. This is the kind of diversification that we have on the front of renewable energy diplomacy. Energy transport corridors, IMEC, and this Chabahar enhanced connectivity, a strategic reserve expansion, partnership with Gulf countries, technology partnership with Israel, UAE that we have discussed, balancing geopolitics we have discussed, like US, Iran, Russia, with safeguarding uninterrupted energy flows. So we have a sort of strategic planning also. Conclusion, India's foreign policy will be increasingly shaped by the energy security nexus that will form the basic fulcrum of our foreign policy as far as Middle East is concerned, in pursuit of our energy security. The next is the reform process in the United Nations remains unresolved because of the delicate balance of East and West enlargement of the USA versus Russia-Chinese alliance. United Nations reform measures, India has been advocating some success, some work is still going on. What is the India's way? Why these reforms are not happening? What are the content of those reforms? And what should India have in its policy today in the context of its efforts for reforms and and to face the reality that it is not happening the way India wants it to happen. The reform process in the United Nations has long remained unresolved, primarily due to the delicate balance between East and West and geopolitical entanglement of US. We have to see the East-West rivalry concept, role of China and Russia as the influencing in the reform measures of the West and the resistance on the part of the West. Western resistance, we have seen the Western resistance for the reforms. The USA and the Western allies dominate the UN Security Council. We have to make it the big five, the P5 have been resistant. They don't want the other countries to have that veto power. Why should they have will to reform? They resist expanding veto power and status quo. They want the status quo. However, after the 45 power structure, despite significant economic and geopolitical shifts globally, West insists on preserving the 1945 status. They don't want a change because to them, change will dilute their power. This results in a democratic deficit. This is our demand, that if you are not reforming the United Nations, it is not truly reflecting the global status, the number of countries, the emerging powers, etc., etc. Because, and this resistance to reform the United Nations leads to what is called democratic deficit within the UN system that fails to represent the contemporary realities. This is part of the answer, and we have to use it. Selective multilateralism. Western nations often bypass the UN in favor of alliances such as NATO and Quad के लिए अमेरिका कर लेता है. Therefore, interest at stake, weakening UN role as a universal platform. Now the role of Russo-Chinese alliance and Eastern counter narrative. Alternative institutions. Russia and India promote organizations like BRICS and SCO as counterweights to Western dominated institutions. So the ones Western countries are siding with their NATO and other alliances, even sometimes at the cost of United Nations. The Russo-Chinese axis is also promoting like BRICS and SCO, and they think that these organizations will act as the counterweight to the Western dominated institutions. Opposing to Western initiative, the alliance systematically opposed US-led proposal, Syria in 2011 and 23, and Ukraine conflict, asserting sovereignty and non-interference principles. ये example है. Another is economic influence. Chinese Belt and Road Initiative (BRI) challenges Western-led development. Ideological difference. Russia and China emphasize preserving traditional values, sovereignty, countering the liberal democratic ideals, even sometimes post-liberal ideals promoted by the West. The results in deadlock on issues like UNSC expansion, veto limitations, and regional representation. These three areas are most vital, that this UNSC expansion, United Nations Security Council expansion, veto limitation, and the regional representation. The world had changed, but the United Nations structure of UNSC and the veto power and the regional representation mechanism still not aligning itself. UN is unable to align itself with the new realities of the world, and therefore hardly any expansion in UNSC, veto limitation, and regional representation, severely resisted by the Western powers. Now the critical values. And the reform deadlock reflects not just East-West polarization, shared interest of P5 powers in the maintaining influence, regional rivalries, emerging powers demands, differing visions of global governance complicate consensus. While the US-Russia-Chinese rivalry dominates headlines, underlying factors such as limited political will among P5, concerns over regional balance, and fears of losing veto leverage impede progress. This is the kind of critical evaluation has to be part of your answer, and conclude it by saying that UN reforms remains a complex challenge rooted in geopolitical rivalries, competing visions of power. A reformed UN must balance East-West interest, democratize decision-making, reflect 21st century realities, India and other emerging powers can play a crucial role in bridging divides by advocating inclusive, multipolar, and cooperative framework to revitalize global governance. If our answer and framework of our answer covers these points, there is no reason to be not happy after the examination is over. Therefore, friends, in the GS2 paper, what we have learned is keep your eyes open, keep track of events happening around, one eye on the syllabus and another eye on the things happening around. Make a list or go for exhaustive study, no problem. But as the examination comes and you are zeroing on certain topics, you can, if you have kept your two eyes wide open, one on syllabus and another on things happening in the field of constitution, Indian polity and governance and social justice and international politics, you can safely zero in on certain topics, and as the trend substantiate relevant topics are very important. They are asked in the examinations, and you are not supposed to have a very well researched paper on it or analysis of it. You are supposed to have a you behave like a well educated person, and you know the you should have that analytical power to make a good attempt at answering the questions. Mind it, you have to answer the question, not you are supposed to write the content. You know, they ask you certain questions and you have to write your answer to the question. This is what UPSC expects it, and this is what you have to do it in your examination, and there is no reason we all can get very good marks. Thank you. Thanking you. Good wishes.